Hi there, welcome to today's painting tutorial. Today I'm going to show you how you can paint a zinnia flower with acrylic paints. So let's get started. I'm going to start with a size 0 round brush. Let's paint the center of the flower. For that I'm going to take some burnt sienna, go around this circle center area. And if you want to paint along with me, grab the sketch linked in the description below. Just going to put this section here. And then there's a little lines that come out from that center. And then we want to get pretty dark around this area. So let's take some of the darker brown. This is a burnt umber. I'm going to start bringing that around this section. We want the center of the flower to be pretty dark to have quite a bit of contrast. So I'm just going to go around these edges, go around some of the bases of the petals. You wouldn't think a shade this dark would be on these pink flowers, but it will start to blend together. So then let's go along some of the bottom sections as well and put some of that contrast. Most of that contrast is along the bottom petals. And I'm just outlining with this dark color, thinking about where the darkest values are going to be and where those darkest shadows are. Okay, underneath here. And take your time. There's a lot of little lines in this sketch, so you don't want to get lost. This is just a nice base dark shade. And I'm even going to put some of this color in this center, make it even darker. Let's also do that to the stem. So I'll come down with some of this really dark brown and put in the darkest shadows for the leaves. Maybe a line right here. And then along this bottom. Okay, so now let's move to a larger brush. I'm going to take this flat brush. This is a size 6 flat brush. And I want to start bringing in some more dark colors. Let's take the burnt sienna. This has a lot of red in it. And I'm going to start putting it in the base of some of these petals. Just pull it back. And I'm keeping the colors a bit darker along the bottom section. Okay, and now I'm going to bring in some red. This is a cadmium red. And I can go on top of some of that burnt umber. This is going to start correcting the color. But the burnt umber is still going to show through underneath, so it's going to keep our nice shadows. Okay, I can bring some of the red up here. Again, it's also creating a nice shadow color. Try to go around these petals, using it as a shadow color. And it can blend some of that brown that you already put down. Okay, so just keep building up with the red. Okay, and then move on to the magenta. And start bringing that magenta out here. Just continue to fill in the petals. And you can go on top of the red as well. Just getting a really nice, vibrant first layer. And then we'll be putting the highlights on top of this. Okay, so it's creating a nice gradation of color. And it's that beautiful pink color as well. Let's bring it this way. And you can see how the acrylic paint is a bit transparent. So even through this magenta, which is kind of a dark color, that pencil sketch is showing through. And that's just something you have to get used to with the acrylic paint, learning how to work with that transparency and knowing how to put opaque colors on top. Okay, we're getting this beautiful, rich, vibrant gradation of color. Just continuing with the pink. So I want it to be really intense and bright in the center, and then we can get a bit cooler as we go out towards the edges. So let's try mixing some of this purple in there and continue to put these flowers along the edge, adding some of that purple. That can help us to create depth because our cooler colors are receding into the background. And our brighter, warmer colors are coming forward. Okay, so I'm continuing to add that purple, using the edge of the flat brush to sort of wiggle the brush to get along that edge of the petal. Kind of a little bit more pink towards the bottom. And then I'm going to add some magenta right there. Just continue to fill these in. We want that variation of color. We want that variation of cool and warm tones. Okay, let's go around the edge with the magenta with some of that pastel purple. And this is just a craft paint. Pastel purple is a great color to have. It's really useful for creating shadows and also really nice cool highlights. Let's bring this over this way. Okay, so that's a really beautiful first layer. If you want to go back and clean up some of the edges, go ahead and do that. Let's let that dry. While it's drying, let's work on this section here. I'll probably stick with a flat brush for that. I'm going to use my size 3. And let's take some of this green paint. Just going to put a layer of green in here. This is the Hooker's green. It's really nice and vibrant. Just going to put a layer of that on the leaves. It can be pretty loose. Let's get that beautiful contrast with the red colors. Do a little more over here. Okay, and then if you want to make a shadow color, you can mix the burnt sienna with the green. Burnt sienna is actually a dark shade of red, desaturated shade. So I'm going to take the bright red and mix that with the green. And they're opposite colors, so when mixed together, they're going to make a beautiful shadow color. And that's a really good way to dull down your greens. And then just put this in for the shadows. Now I notice that some of my darker values are looking a bit streaky. So I'm going to take some red paint. See what happens if we paint over them with the red. See if that'll smooth it out. It's going to continue to have that dark value, but this second layer is just going to create a bit more cohesion, get rid of some of that streakiness. And now it's time to start adding the highlights, which is going to make this look three-dimensional and make everything start to pop. Let's try using a small blender brush for that. So this is where we want to start adding titanium white. I'm going to take some of the magenta with the white and start bringing out some of these highlights. So I'm just thinking about the direction that these petals are going. And we want the lighter value to be at the top of the petal. And then it's going to come down and get lighter. And see if you can still see your sketch. It's popping through very slightly. I'm just bringing this lighter value up at the top of the petal, then pulling it down. Continue to add that white in there. You don't want to overdo this. You want to be a bit careful, but lighten the edge of the petal. And then bring it in towards the center. Pull that paint. And you might want to turn your paper for this. That could make it a bit easier. Okay, you don't want to cover up everything underneath because you want a lot of that color to still show through. Just dragging it down. Okay, if you use too much highlights, it's not going to have the effect that you want. Okay, and you might have to go over it a few times. Okay, I'm going to use some of this purple along the bottom petals. And do that same technique. Just add the light value, and then try to pull it towards the center. We're using that purple because it's a bit less bright and it's going to recede into the background. That section is in shadow. Same with this section over here. Okay, so we're doing all these beautiful highlights. And then and pull it down. Okay, and then I'm going to take a liner brush. I have a 2/0 liner brush. Now I'm going to bring back in some of the lighter values. So let's take some magenta. I'm going to mix it with a bit of this coral pink and maybe some red. Then I'm going to come back and just put these little stripes. And that's going to create further detail, further realism. And you're also going on top of some of that lighter value that you just put in. It's going to help things to blend together a bit and look a little more cohesive. Okay, and you'll notice some of these lighter values that we put in, they're actually drying quite a bit darker. So we're almost losing those highlights. That's why you would have to let it dry and come back to do another layer of the highlights. Let's take that flat brush and put some lighter values in the leaves. So I'm going to take some of this yellowish color mixed with the hooker's green. Start pulling out some highlights for the stem. That can be loose and light and easy. Okay, I'm going to grab that size 0 round brush and we need to put some detail into the center. So let's take this light yellow. Got some brown in there, so I'm going to rinse the brush really good. Might actually use, let's use a 2/0 round brush instead, and that one's clean. And in the center, start putting these little sections, little curved shapes for the center of the flower. It's going to show up on top of that dark background that we put in. Okay, and then you can also start putting in the little sections of that center area. Okay, and then I'm going to take some of the burnt sienna and I'm just going to add some of that in there to add a shadow on top of these little yellow pieces. Just refine everything. Okay, so at this point it's time to add the final highlights. So for that, I'm going to use a size 6 filbert brush. And we want to get pretty light with this. So some white with just a small amount of pink, small amount of magenta. And let's put some right here. So I'm just going on top of the petals that are really going to be in highlight. Mostly towards the center. We don't want these really bright highlights around the edges. They're mostly here in the center. Then along here, they're almost just on the edge. You can just use your brush to highlight those edges of the petals. Okay. Then I'm going to, let's add a bit of green to that center. So that light green we used for the stem, you can add some of that into the middle. And then with the 2/0 round, take some white paint and put little dots on top of the yellow section. That's just going to add a bit more realism for that area. Okay, and then you can highlight that center piece. Okay, so this stage of the painting, we're just working back and forth with our highlights and our dark values. That's always a dance towards the end of your painting. Okay, I'm going to add a few more little highlights for some of these petals. And you can go back again with the liner brush, add even more detail to each little petal, creating these striations and adding as much detail as you would like. You can really take your time with this. Okay, I'm going to make a wash of Hooker's Green, so just some Hooker's Green with quite a bit of water. I'm going to try to go over the leaves and the stem with this wash, just so that it looks a little bit more cohesive. That's a good way to correct your values if they're just a little too intense in certain areas. And then I'm going to take the 2/0 liner, mix some of the yellow with the Hooker's Green, and do another, see if we can do another highlight. Make it a little bit lighter, more yellow. Just do a little line there. Okay, and I think we will call this tutorial complete. That is how you can paint a zinnia flower with acrylic paints. I hope you give this a try. Like and subscribe for more painting tutorials. Grab my free guide in the description below if you want to go deeper into painting with me, and I'll see you in the next tutorial. Bye!